Hey guys, it's Baileywiki, and today we're going to do a design with me session. I'm going to show you how to make this scene. The scene took about 12 minutes to make, and I'm going to walk you through how to do it. Now, this is a special session because we're going to start by making the scene, and this is for everyone who's been following me and been a Patreon for maybe years and years. Just showing you the latest techniques for building. I'm going to show you some of this diorama stuff that we have available this month. But then at the end of this, we're going to go into a much deeper tutorial on how everything works, where to find content, how mass edit works, things like that. So if you already know all that stuff, you can just watch the first part if you're interested in seeing some of the new assets in play. But for those of you who want to see more detail on how I did all this, just jump through the timestamps and you can see it from start to finish, how everything really fundamentally works. So with that, let's get started. Okay, so we're looking at a pre-made template right now. This is a diorama template. And I'm just kind of showing you that these things are set up to be non-square. And when you double click on them, they're mat enabled, so you can randomize them and cycle through different options that are available to you. And there's a lot of different, and resize them and do all sorts of stuff, which I'll show you in more detail in the release video. But for right now, let's see how we got here in the first place. Let's build something from scratch. We're going to start a new scene. These diorama tiles are all square, so we'll start with a square scene and go in here. Let's activate it. And first thing, we'll open up our mass edit browser and we'll just search for diorama. And the very first thing we'll see is this unlimited terrain spawner, which means if we drag it onto the map, it will fill the map edges. That's why we wanted to set it to square. Now, if we want to just drop a tile in, we can go see all of our options down here below, and we can just drop one of those in if we find one that we like. We're going to use this randomization option just to show you how it works. Okay, so we've dropped in our diorama tile. It's all perfectly the size of the scene. And I'll just show you, it works best with a black background, I think. It just really lets you, for me, I just find the intrigue of focusing on that thing in the middle. I like this one. So let's pick this. It's got some varied terrain. I feel like I can drop something in the middle of there. Maybe we'll make a campsite out of this. So let's drop in a player, which this is kind of the scale at which the scene would be. But we'll talk about in a second. There's actually a problem that token's about half the size that it should be. So this seems actually a bit bigger than we realize at this point. We'll make some corrections later. So now the tile's too big for the scene. We're going to use this fit tile to scene macro. You can find it in nuts and bolts, and that will do the same thing, make it fit the dimensions of the scene. Turn it back to black. Now we've got something cool to work with. Let's pull our player up, and let's set global illumination to always be everything's visible except for when it gets dark. Okay, so when it gets dark, that's when we want our vision to get decreased. All right, so let's drop some things in here. Let's start with a fir tree. This is a fir tree brush. There's actually multiple versions of that tree in there. And let's set our scale so that it kind of randomizes the scale a little bit. And then rotation, we're not really going to worry about. All of these dioramas and these fir trees, in fact, also the light comes from the top left. We'll apply a tall drop shadow to these trees, and then we'll just start dropping them in. These are actually overhead tiles, so our players can walk underneath these trees if they want to. And we'll just make some more adjustments on our brush. And you can see it's kind of randomizing the size, but the light comes from the top left for both the trees and the diorama. So you might want to pay attention to that when you're placing these things. You might want your light to agree. Now we're going to adjust the ambient light with Foundry. This is core Foundry stuff. I want it to our sunny days to be sunnier. And let's set like a kind of a yellowish hue. We'll kind of set that where we think it looks good. And now it's nice, bright, sunny day. And you can do so much manipulation of color schemes, even with these dioramas, with just your lighting. There's some other tricks I'll show you here later. Let's just test it out. Let's walk around on our scene. This is feeling pretty good. Okay, so now let's add a campsite. Got a few to pick from. And let's let's pick this simple one. Just got a fire and some things to sit on. And we will drop that into our scene wherever we think our camp might go. We'll use the Alt key and the mouse wheel to scale it. You can hear the fire crackling because there's a sound attached to this. And I noticed that our token spawned with only 50% of its size. Now we're going to, now that we fixed that, everything's the right scale. So the campfire is matte enabled. That's why you can toggle it on and off. We'll add both of these tents to a brush, and we'll use our Shift, Control, and Alt keys along with our mouse wheel to adjust its size and position. And put our next one in there. It's looking pretty good. I think 2 tents is probably enough. And then maybe our party is traveling with a wagon. Maybe somebody's going to sleep in that wagon. These wagons here actually have tops to them, which you can remove. These tops are colorable. There's also different varieties of covers. If you right-click the cover, you can see different options. I'm just going to hold down the Shift key and place it kind of exactly where I want it. I like that it's sitting kind of occluded under the trees there. It looks kind of like we're nestled in here to this camping space. There are interiors to these tents. We're just testing those out. If we want to make changes, put a different kind of bed or blankets in there, we can do that. They're all put together with multiple tiles. This is looking good. Now, one trick I want to show you is I don't want those tents to block my vision everywhere. So I'm going to hit select everything and press Shift E. That engages this special mass edit window. We're going to set proximity, actually reverse proximity thresholds for vision. So now when we're standing away from the tent, it doesn't block vision. It's only when we stand close to those walls now block vision. And that works. So we're in the tent, it blocks our vision out. We leave the tent, and unless we're standing right next to it, it doesn't block vision. Okay, this is feeling pretty good so far. So we've got this terrain up here. I'm trying to think of what story do we want to tell. Let's go ahead and drop the lights and just see how this looks at night. Yeah, this is looking good. Whether we're going to fight this fight in day or night, probably important to know what it's going to look like in both. Let's go ahead and put some ambient audio in here. We're going to take off volume easy. We're going to reduce the volume down very, very low because we're going to put an ambient loop in here. We'll go into sounds inside of the Baileywiki Towns module. You can also find these sounds just through the Mass Edit interface as well. I'm just showing you how to do it through here. And we're going to look for forest. And we're going to see we've got some Michael Gelfi loops that should work pretty well. I like the serene forest for the day. And then I'll just copy the Twilight Forest link here because we're going to use that in a second. Since this is daytime, let's, before we leave here, make it turn off when the lights go down. And then we'll duplicate this. And for this one, we are going to do the reverse. We'll put the Twilight Dark Forest in here, and then we will reverse the time. So it'll start at 0.5 and go to full darkness. All right, so now we've got a night and day option here. That's pretty good. You can hear our daytime happy birds singing. Notice we can hear that fire still making its noise. We'll fix that here in a second. Here we've got the night version. A lot more eerie. Looking good. Okay, so let's. The train feels like there needs to be a cave in there. So we'll look here for cave. Got a lot of cave assets, but I'm looking for something specific. Looking for a cave mouth. In fact, it's called a cave mouth. I could have just typed cave mouth and found it. And it's just a tile. It's just a tile that can go on the edge of a surface like you see here and imply that there's a mysterious cave up there in the corner. Maybe the players discover that. Maybe you keep it hidden until they discover it. It's just a tile after all. And I really like this terrain here. I feel like maybe I want to hide a surprise in there. So I'm gonna make this just so that enemies can hide back on that ridge and my players may not realize it. Or maybe the reverse. Maybe my players are gonna attack this area and they've got some safety of being behind that ridge. But I wanted to do something very specific. I want it to not block vision if you're close to it. So the further away it blocks vision, but if you're close to it, and we'll use the proximity attenuation for this. When you're close to it, it'll basically disappear. So that's perfect. I can't see past it unless I start walking up towards it, and then it starts to reveal what's behind it. And if I am behind it, it doesn't block my vision. All right, so that's how I want it to work. Okay, so let's see what else we might add. What I like to do at this point is I like to look up plot hooks. This is a Baileywiki thing where we create stuff that gives you inspiration on what you might drop into a scene, right? So here, there's tons and tons of plot hooks, but right off the bat, I kind of like this idea of, I don't know, maybe this goblin effigy. Yeah, maybe this skeleton. Drop a skeleton here. Because of the brush enabled, I forgot to take off that drop shadow. I have to remove that drop shadow. So I'm just going to use delete filters unselected. It's another macro inside of nuts and bolts. And then I'm going to apply a short drop shadow just to make it look like it's sitting up off the ground a little bit. And it's subtle, but it's nice to add these kinds of little details. And then I'll just show you this. I don't do this a lot, but I don't know, something about the scene makes me want to have birds and eagles flying in. I'm going to drop the density down so there's not a whole lot of animal life flying around us. And once you hit save, it won't close the window, but you can see it immediately activates the birds. And so I think that's a pretty good addition. Now, I want to get this fireplace to shut off when I actually shut it off. And so there's actually a few tiles going on here. And so what I want to do is hold down the Alt key, which will let me move that top tile, even though it's part of a prefab. And then I want to use my pixel perfect hover and hover over the bottom one. And this is where I find the matte information. So it's trying to turn off or toggle campfire 1. And so the way I'm going to fix that is I'm going to go into the light, into the sound, and I'm going to give it the tag campfire 1. You can see for some reason it came out as campfire 2. Sometimes the bugs like that happen, and just showing you this to show you how to fix it. So now that light or that sound, if I turn it off, as my fire's off, now if I turn it on, click the whole thing, then the light and the sound both activate because they both have the campfire 1. All right, so just to show you kind of one more thing you can do, I mentioned that these diorama tiles are really flexible. Let's go like change the shape of this map. Maybe we want it to be a little bit bigger. Maybe we want a certain like terrain or something. Let's grab this terrain here and we'll drop it in. And for the most part, these things can just resize and bunch up on each other pretty easily. We'll move this one to the background. And you can see it's pretty seamless transition. I mean, it's really good for an instant map, right? And we'll move these trees out of the way and see we've already just changed the dimensions of the scene. Now we could see the rest of that tile if we wanted to make the scene larger and then put everything in the middle of it. It's being blocked by the edges of the scene, of course. But this is how you make this kind of stuff. And you know, we're only like 10 minutes into this effort. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this, and then stick around for the rest of the tutorial to see in detail how some of this stuff works, how you find these assets, and other stuff that might be helpful if you're new to the channel. Okay, so now we're going to start with how to just even access Baileywiki stuff. If you already know how to do this, get the modules installed and, get them turned on in Foundry, you can skip this section. For those of you who are new though, you're going to come to my Patreon and you're going to find a membership that you like. If you want Foundry stuff, I recommend you start with the Foundry basic track. If you also use Dungeon Draft, or if you want to use advanced Foundry stuff like 3D, this Foundry advanced track will give you all the Foundry stuff. This Foundry Basic and Dungeon Draft will give you basic Foundry, which is a lot of what we do, and all the Dungeon Draft stuff as well. And if you just want everything, then all the things tier is where you want to go with. Okay, so once you sign up for one of these that supports Foundry content, you need to make sure that you've bought a Foundry license. And once you have and you log into the Foundry website, I'm on foundryvtt.com, go into your edit profile, and you're going to link your Patreon account down here. If you've already done it and you're having problems, you can refresh your account or you can unlink and relink. These will sometimes fix some issues where you're not seeing the content you paid for within Foundry. Once you've connected your account here, then before I go any further, if you are a Forge user, then when you're on Forge, you go into your My Account section, go into linked accounts. This is where you'll add your Patreon account here. You have to do it in both places if you're a Forge user, in both Foundry and Forge websites. Okay, with that, you'll eventually launch your Foundry server, whether you're hosting on Forge or whether you're self-serving. I've already set up some worlds here. Yours will probably be blank. You will start by installing a game system like D&D 5e or Pathfinder 2nd Edition or DC-20. You just look for the systems here and install directly from this page. It'll install any number of game systems. And then you will come into your add-on modules. This will probably also be blank. And you're going to say install module. It's going to open up the Foundry module directory. These are all the official modules that are on the Foundry directory. There are other modules that you can install just with their manifest, just through an install link. But these are all the official ones. So if you look for Baileywiki, you get a whole bunch of modules with Baileywiki name on them. You want to install everything that you have access to. So some things like Storyteller or the 3D module, you have to be a premium Foundry tier to be able to access those. But if you can, it will make it unlockable and you can see an install button next to it. Anything you can install, do it, with one exception. You do not need the free maps module. That's just a free maps module for others who are non-subscribers to try out our stuff. If you are a paid subscriber, you don't need that at all. There are better versions of all of these maps and assets in the premium modules. So with the exception of Baileywiki free maps, install everything else. Definitely want mass edit and nuts and bolts. Towns is the largest module. It will take a long time to install. There's reasons for that. But if you have problems, just try installing Towns by itself, and the rest you can install. Well, for that matter, Baileywiki 3D is very large as well. So you might want to install those just by themselves, not just pressing install all. Once you install everything that you like, there will also be a bunch of dependency modules that come with it, things that we require in order to use all of our content fully, like token magic effects and others. It should install those automatically. Once it's all done, you're going to actually build and create your own world, your first world. You're going to give it a title, pick the game system that you want to use, and then you'll create that world. Once it's created, you'll get a little card like this, which you can't click into. And you'll get a login screen. If you haven't set up your credentials yet, you'll just log in as a GM, probably with no password. Once you're in your world, if you haven't done it already, you're going to activate all of your Baileywiki modules. So you go into the Settings tab, Manage Modules, and you'll get any modules that you've installed. You can activate or deactivate them here. You're going to want to look for all of your Baileywiki modules and tick them all on for right now. You technically don't need all of them on, but it's just easier if you do. Everything that we provide in compendiums and whatnot is already organized, so it's just as easy to keep them all on. You're going to save your module settings, and it's going to then refresh your world and activate all those modules for you. What's going to happen then is you're going to get a bunch of new compendiums. So we're going to talk about scenes first. And by the way, if you have any problems getting to this point, you can't get any of these
some of these modules activated, just come hit my Discord. We'll link to it in the video description. And you can go to my troubleshooting channel and just ask there for help and you'll get it right away. All right, so now that we've got our compendiums installed, it may or may not organize this for you. It should give you all of your Baileywiki stuff in one nice, neat package. But if you just type 2D, you'll find the Baileywiki 2D scenes. That's opposed to 3D, which is all of our 3D scenes. Here's our 3D scenes here. But for our basic users, just type in 2D. Open this up, and you will get hundreds of scenes. This is everything that we've ever made. All the latest stuff will go at the top, but you can literally search lots of things like forest. You get lots of forest scenes. I mean, you name it. You can type in different dungeons. You can go and just hunt through, the folders to look for things. A couple of special things. We have these release. You'll also hear them called inventory scenes. These are going to be scenes that have just all the inventory for particular release in them, right? So if I import that, I can see everything that came out in a release. This just makes it easy for you to kind of go through and see what these different releases have in them. Some other special scenes are things like the scrolling scene or scenes. Go ahead and import that. Scrolling scenes have the special effect where the scenes scroll and they have capabilities to, change them in different ways sort of dynamically. So if you want to play around with those, you can like speed them up, slow them down. Other scenes you might want to look at are template scenes. These are scenes that are set up in a way that you can just start building on them right away. Here's a template for a goblin city under, in a cave kind of thing. And you can just start with these and then drop in prefabs. The main thing about most of Baileywiki maps is the thumbnails won't render very well because a lot of these are made with modular tiles, and Foundry doesn't really do a good job of generating thumbnails for those. So you might have to just import, multiple scenes and kind of see how they're laid out and figure out from there. I wish there was a better way to browse them. Maybe we'll come up with one someday. Other things that you're going to care about? It should be mostly done for you automatically, or things like nuts and bolts. There's a bunch of macros and things that come inside of that. These can be very helpful if you want to implement effects. Some of these effects only work with Baileywiki Premium content. Some of them work with any content. For the most part, these will be called automatically when you absolutely need them, but you may find it helpful to come in here and browse through and experiment with what some of these effects do. A lot of these are token magic effects, Monk's active tiles, other things that you might find helpful when you're building or designing scenes. Now, the next thing you'll want to know about is Baileywiki Mass Edit. Mass Edit does lots of stuff. It's a free module. It's got lots of utility. Whether you're a subscriber or not, you'll probably want to get it because it does so much. But what it also does is it serves up all of our content that's not scenes. So all of our tiles, prefabs, sounds, everything else from Baileywiki you can get through this Mass Edit browser here. So once you've installed it and implemented or enabled Mass Edit, you click on the Mass Edit presets. It opens up your preset browser. At the top, you can do things like looking at all of the presets that Baileywiki has. Yours will be blank here. This is my working Mass Edit inventory page. You're going to come down here and see any external providers, content providers that use Mass Edit. That includes myself. It also includes Mad Cartographer, if you're a Mad Cartographer subscriber. And you'll see Baileywiki or Mad Cartographer down here below. When you open it up, you'll see all these different categories that then open up into lots and lots of other categories. So we have hundreds, maybe thousands of prefabs. We have tens of thousands of tiles. Those tiles you can find here in the virtual directory. So Mass Edit not only indexes all of Baileywiki's tiles, but if you want to, you can index all of your other assets that you own. So here's all the Baileywiki stuff, and under here are tens of thousands of tiles. You can come in here and you won't have these same indexes, but you can create an index where you keep your stuff. And Mass Edit will actually index things for you and even give you a tagging system where you can tag your stuff as much as you like. That means that this window can become your browser for really everything that you own. And as you go through these tabs, these are really just filtering to like, hey, I just want to see things that are tile based, or I want to see drawings or any special walls that I've saved. I use this one a lot, lighting. These are just lights that I've pre-built so I can drag them out. I got the lights set up the way that I like them, like how I want the torch glow, how I want the torch glow, and then I'll drag it out into a scene and make that really easy. You can also get all your sounds, and the virtual directory even works with sounds. So if you connect that to your different sound sources, and it includes Baileywikis automatically, you can search for sounds and actually drag these on, and you can right click, copy source to clipboard, and you can do a bunch of stuff with that. Other things that you can do here, you can import and export items that are in MassEdit. You may want to import them as JSON, move them around between compendiums, that sort of thing. What this is actually doing, this is just reading some hidden compendiums. So in your compendium tab, there's a bunch of hidden compendiums for Baileywiki prefabs, and this is just reading information off of that. You can also select, you'll have defaulted to this main compendium, but if you have other compendiums installed that are unlocked, you can maneuver between those as well. You can lock your current category as the one that opens up automatically. I set mine to tiles since most everything is in there. You can have it automatically switch your layers. So if you're on tile layer and you open up MassEdit, it'll open up to tiles. I leave mine off. And these other ones you can play around with as well. You can hide any external compendium. So if you don't want to see my stuff, you can hide it. And then you can hide or unhide the virtual directory as well. You can search, and searching works with anything. So if I say tree canopy, I'll see a bunch of tree canopies that are presets. If I go down below, I'll see under my virtual directory any tree canopy tiles if I just want to grab the original tile. You also have a whole tagging system. So you can look up all the tags that apply to whatever you've searched. And then you can hide or unhide the folders as well if you want to include the folder names within your search, which can be helpful. If you put in pound foliage, for example, it will force a tag search. So it won't just search for foliage, it'll say it has to be a tag in order to have it show up as a result. You have different sorting options. You can create new folders, and you can actually create some presets from things you've already got selected in the menu or in the scene. As we go down and search, let's do our tree canopy again. You'll see the results, and you can just double click and it will bring this out onto the scene. You notice that it colored it orange. That's because this has a special Token Magic Effects filter applied. I'll talk about that here now as well. You see it's got not only a Token Magic Effects filter, meaning its original color was red, but because red is a colorable pixel, I can change its color to something else. In this case, it made it kind of that gold color. Here I just turned it green. So any red pixels you can change color. It's a Token Magic Effects module. It's free, and it's what created and powered the ability to recolor that. Token Magic Effects also applied this drop shadow. So you see how there's not a drop shadow when I drag this around, but when I do, it gives us a nice drop shadow. That lets the shadow cast on other things. It makes it look like the tree is standing up off of the canvas, and it's a really good effect. Other things you might notice if I double click this is that it's actually an overhead tile. It's set for 10 feet above the player's heads. It's also set to always be visible, meaning a player will walk underneath it and it won't occlude. You can change these settings afterwards. You can even duplicate this brush. If I hit duplicate, now I have another version of it in my working compendium, and I can make changes to that. So if I go to edit and I say, look, I want all of these to actually fade when I walk underneath them, I can create this and it'll work that way. I can change all of the other elements that are part of this prefab, and MassEdit will save all of that with it. So it's really powerful in that it'll support anything you can build in Foundry using any modules. You can save all those things because they all work with tags and data types for those modules, and it'll save it all to the entity document. So that's dragging out one item, but I also mentioned you can add things to brushes. So if I right click and say brush, it will create this little sandbox for me. And if I reset this to its defaults, you can see I've got rotation, scale, and density. I can change all these. Density just means if I drag this around, it'll deploy more as I drag. It'll deploy multiple. You may not use that a lot. I recommend not spamming your scenes with hundreds of tiles anyways. But you can make it scale randomized. So maybe I want this tree to sort of randomly change dimension, bigger, smaller, that kind of thing. Here, let's make these really small. See how small they get? So that's how you can use that. And then you can randomize their rotation. And then you can also randomize other things. Now, this brush already has randomization built into it. Let's see if I can show you that. Go to Edit. And you can see these here. This means that it's automatically going to randomize scale, rotation, and the dungeon draft colors, or the colors of it. So these are the colors and the scheme that I picked to make this more of an autumn type of randomization. Make sense? I also included things like treetop as a tag. This uses the tagger module. This lets me place a bunch of things down and then look for that tag treetop later if I want to make changes to all of them. Also, with the brush, you can make it so that you just paint settings onto an existing entity, or you can have it actually spawn an entity. You can lock it to its current preset. So if there's multiple entities on a brush, if I selected all of these and added all of these to a brush, these are all different entities. If I really like this one and I want to lock it in and make that the only one that deploys, I can do that here. Randomization will make it random. So watch this. It'll randomly move around that list. This will spawn multiple presets as a group if they were coded as a group. These weren't. This will snap to grid. So you see how it's like trying to snap to grid. It's good for things like tokens or buildings. This will try to scale things to adjust to the map that you're on. You generally might want to have that on. This will change the color randomly, and it does it in one of two ways. You can either leave this off and you can generate a color, like let's say red, for example. Now let's pick a different asset here. Let's do these palm trees. So we'll do one preset at a time, and you see it colors these palm trees red. Normally they're not red, right? Normally they're like that color. You can also colorize things by clicking this FX tool, and that requires the Dungeon Draft Tint option. That's going to say if it's got red pixels, color them a different color. So you might want to use that. You also have this randomization function, which is what I showed you earlier. If you want to randomize across different color spectrums, you can do that as well. Eraser just lets you erase things on the screen. Control Z, by the way, gets you out of the eraser mode. Notice these are foreground tiles, so I have to be on the foreground to delete them. Token Magic Effects, this applies Token Magic Effects to the entity. If you're using my content, you'll get a bunch of built-in Token Magic Effects stuff. You can have things like trees, there's leaves are swaying. Just to give you an example, there's one without any swaying leaves. And if we just type in tree, oh, leaves swaying, let's go strong, save that. We'll place another one. This will make the leaves now sway. And you can see I might have to change my drop shadow here. So it like doubled up my drop shadow. That's how you use some of these effects automatically. The common ones that you're going to use are going to be things like drop shadow. You have a short and a tall drop shadow. Those are common that I use just because if I have something and it doesn't have a drop shadow on it, that's how I'll add it. Remember, you have to save it and then you can delete it. You can also add tags to things that you drop in case you want to keep track of everything later and be able to search for them. So we talked about Token Magic Effects. TMFX is the short name we use to kind of tip you off that there's Token Magic Effects already applied to something. Other things that you might look for are the word multi. And multi will mean that there's multi-face tiles enabled. So like if we grab this campsite, for example, we drag it out onto the scene. Because it has multi, we know that there's something about this campsite that's changeable. So if I select this roof, for example, I can see there's a version that doesn't have the tusks or bones coming out of it. There's also another version of this campsite that has no bottom to it in case you want to have the artwork underneath shine through. Okay, that's what multi means, is that there's things about it that you can just right click if you have multi-face tiles enabled and you can see alternatives. Other things you'll see are matte. That stands for amongst active tiles. That means there's something automated about that particular asset. So in this case, matte is automating the fire being able to douse or not. If I open up the particular tile here at the top of the fire and I go to triggers, I can see if I click it, it will toggle the activation of this fire and it'll play that little noise. That's how you can come in and determine maybe where automation's coming from, in case you want to see how it's operating and replicate it yourself or turn it off. These are ways that you can do that. Now, if you're looking for my prefabs, they used to all be listed under the token tab. It's because they were powered by Token Attacher, which is a module that we've been using for years from KLG that's awesome for creating prefabs, attaching everything to a token. But with Mass Edit, we've been able to move away from token-based prefabs and really make everything just sort of attached to each other more naturally, more natively, without having to use a token. That means that most of our prefabs connect to tiles. And so most of your prefabs you're going to find in the tile tab for Baileywiki stuff. And there's lots of things. Like if you just look for buildings, you'll find all kinds of buildings. By the way, if you didn't know, this expands out so you can see these thumbnails better. You can see all kinds of buildings. And if we just double click this building, we can drop it into the scene. Now I'm going to hold down Shift to turn it a lot at a time. This is Shift and mouse wheel, or Control will give you very fine tuning. You can also press Alt in mouse wheel, and that will scale it up or down. And then if there's more than one thing attached, like if this was a brush, for example, you can hold Control and Shift, it will cycle through that. But I can just drop that in, and I've got a perfectly usable hut with a roof. If I hold down Alt, I can move this roof without moving the rest of the prefab. If I don't hold down Alt, it will move the whole prefab and let me continue to move that around because they're all attached to each other. You notice it's got multi-face tiles on the top, so I can change the top of the hut if I'd like, if I want to customize the huts and have a bunch of them sitting in the same scene. This is just an example of just buildings, and you can see this is complete with walls and lights. There may be sounds associated with some of these, and it's all meant to drop in and be really easy to use and manipulate. But there are tons of buildings. There's Elvish and Dwarvish buildings. There's big 3-story buildings like these Tudor buildings that are quite large and lots, ends up being hundreds, thousands of pieces in some of these things. You've got churches, got all kinds of buildings that are multi-face tiles enabled as well. So there might be more than one option. So how they say multi. If I drag this out, put it into my scene, it's got a little roof on it. If I turn on levels, you'll notice that here's the interior, right? There's the roof, there's the interior. If I right click it, I have other options. So maybe I want it to be empty and maybe drop in some furniture, right? So now that it's empty, maybe I want to look for a bed. And I come down here, you see where the blue is, that means you're in the virtual directory. These are just tiles. Maybe I just like this hay bed. I want to put that in the scene. Right, here's some more decorated hay beds. This is how you can use, if you hold down Shift, you can very accurately place it where you want. This is how you can decorate interior spaces. Lots of different kinds of beds. Here's some hammocks, right? Maybe I want a hammock in this room, right? You can get really huge stuff like galleons. Here's a galleon. These multi-level galleons actually work. They have regions on them that you can attach tokens to. You can attach tokens and they'll actually stick to the boat, and so you can move things around within a scene. Things you'll use a lot are just trees. right? This tree canopy, some autumn coloring. Here's some with summer coloring, right? So they're all green. You'll also use a lot of like campsites. You'll use a lot of wagons, right? So these wagons here all have tops to them. You can resize them. You can even recolor. These are multi-phase tiles. So you can change the style of the wagon. Anytime you see red pixels, it means you can recolor it. Maybe we want this wagon to be more of a blue color. You can do that. And then if you want to delete the top of the wagon, right? So if I hold down Alt, I can move this out of the way temporarily. Maybe I just want the bottom. Well, I can just hit Shift Delete. It'll just delete that one entity. It'll keep the rest of the preset intact. If you want to build your own presets like you see here, there's really easy ways to use it. Do it using the linker function. I won't cover that in this tutorial, but you can look in my videos. And we'll do a full mass edit tutorial at some point in the future to teach you how to make your own presets. You'll use a lot of street lamps, different types. These are just really easy ways of, let's reset that, go to spawning mode. It's really easy ways to add lighting. This actually comes with a light that only comes on when the nighttime, when your ambient light comes down. So it makes it really nice to have just automatic lighting for nighttime scenes. And of course, you have plot hooks. These are just ideas to help you say, okay, what do I want to drop into a scene that maybe I'm not thinking about? Right? Here's just a big pile of, whoops. Here's just a big pile of crates. Maybe that's supposed to go in a scene. There are traps and revealed things. Here's a working grave, right? So if I put this grave down and it's Token Magic Effects powered, if I click it, it will make this visible to your players or invisible. They click this, you can actually have there's a gravestone under here. This eye is invisible to your users. The gravestone and the tile underneath it is visible. But if I click into it, go to triggers and actions, I can change the message that scrolls when they click on that headstone. Right? So that's how you use this stuff. Here's some tanks of ooze where the tops actually work. Right? You can put tokens inside of there. If I select it, this is the whole prefab, and I hit Shift D, that puts it back into preview mode, and I can resize it. So maybe I want this tank to be a little bit smaller. Maybe I want it to be huge. But if you hit Shift D, it just puts everything back into preview mode, and you can manipulate it like you'd like to. But dead bodies, floor reveals, right? Now that's visible to your users. It's multi-phase tile enabled, so maybe you want it to be a hole or water, or maybe you want to put an item in there. Here's a treasure box. These are just things to help you do more with your scenes with less time. So you can go in here and there's other plot hooks and things that you can expand out and use. These are just tiles. Anytime you see this blue ridge, this is just the virtual directory. It's just dumb tiles. Another important tile to know is about spawner tiles. These are tiles that will automatically spawn terrains, and they will automatically try to fill all of your space. So this tile here is actually a spawner tile. If I delete it, see, it's just an empty tile. If I want to drag out another one, like city streets, drag it out, and then it will take you to where all the spawner tiles can be found. And these are all tileable. So right now it's defaulted to this regular city street. Maybe I want a city street that's snowy, or like here's some docks. Right, so maybe we're in the docks district of the town. These are really big tiles, by the way. That's why it's taking a while to load them. Let's pick the docks. And you can see it randomly finds some pan and zoom point in that dock. Let's delete our campsite and our extra stuff. We don't need those. Now, the thing about spawner tiles is they'll automatically attempt to fill the edges of the scene. And when you double click them, you can often change things like their position. So here I'm just randomly picking different views of this dock. And depending on what I land on, that may tell a different story. I can now put ships into these docks here if I want to. or maybe I've got some kind of battle going on out at sea. If you find something that's close, maybe you want this to be all water, I can just start moving those docks out of the frame, and now I have an all water shot. I can rotate this. I can zoom out. I can zoom in, right? So you can change really quickly the scene that you're working with. I can also change the overlay and decide I don't want docks, I want something else. Maybe I want some tropical island. See that? And you can do the same thing. Randomize its position so you find a scene that you want to work with. You might want to drop in a token so you can see how the scale looks with everything. But here's a great little scene. I might start my players here on this little peninsula, and they work their way around this bay. And maybe I put a stronghold here, or a cave that they discover, or there's just a boss, right? Here's a nice shoreline. There's lots of stuff that you can do with this just with these spawner tiles. Now, a couple things to mention. Because there's so much content in here and these modules change a lot, sometimes certain things won't work properly, right? There will be a macro that no longer works. There will be some sort of interaction that doesn't work anymore. Those are just kind of unavoidable. That's why I do tutorials to teach you guys how to do these things so you can come in and fix amongst active tile or something that might be broken. If you do find something that's broken, though, we have a special channel. It's our bug reporting channel. So you can come in here and report bugs anytime you'd like, and you can come in here and report any issues you have with any Baileywiki content or installing or any other technical support that you might need. So that's it. I hope you guys learned enough in this section to get in here and start making stuff of your own right away, or just knowing how the content works, how to find things. Let me know in the comments if there's a particular place you want me to go back and discuss. If there's an area after you've been using Baileywiki stuff for a while, if there's an area you'd like more tutorials on, or if you feel like our tutorials are out of date anywhere, just let us know that either in these comments or on our Discord. And with that, I hope you guys have a ton of fun making your maps.